welcome everyone. I am thrilled to be hosting this evening's Women in Platforms, and I have invited one of my dear colleagues, Vicki Joshi, to come and talk to us. So Vicki is the director in the customer practice at KPMG, so I'm using all of my resources, which is ace, to come and talk to us about customer. And we've been doing some research at KPMG, looking at customers and how their behaviours have changed during the pandemic. So I don't know, Vicki, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? And then I can just crack on with the questions. And but maybe someone wants to get that phone first. But what we can do is, Vicki, if you sort of like give you a bit of an overview, and then we'll go into the questions. We've got some questions and answers for about half an hour, and then you can just fire a whole bunch of questions at Vicki, and she will do her very best to answer them. Is that cool?
Cool. Okay. Right, so yeah, thanks, Rose. Super excited to come and talk to you guys today about something I'm incredibly passionate about, which is customers. And I guess just to elaborate on what Rose just said, so I'm a director in the financial services customer practice. I am all about how do we make sure that we help organisations think about things from an outside in perspective. So actually, how do you genuinely understand the needs of customers, so that you can build propositions, experiences that meet those needs. So I guess what we've been looking at over the last 6 months or so is starting to understand actually have those needs changed due to the COVID crisis, and how are customers feeling? How are they interacting with organisations, and what do they need moving forward in order to make those kind of purchase decisions and think about where they're going to spend their money, their time and their effort. So the research that I want to talk to you guys today about is, I guess, there's two different aspects to it. The first one is actually taking what we refer to as our Customer Experience Excellence Centre, which we've been running for the last 11 years, which looks at the best brands in the UK, and in fact it's 33 other markets as well, in terms of who's delivering customer experience excellence. And we publish these rankings on an annual basis. There'll be brands that you all sort of know and love that you'd expect to see in there. So, you know, First Direct is often up there at the top, John Lewis, organisations like that. But maybe some brands that you're not probably using on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if you know much about QVC and how customer-centric they are, and how they've created a very kind of, if you like, consistent branded customer experience across all of their different channels. So there's some aspects of what we've learned from the Customer Experience Excellence Centre that really start to help us understand what a great customer or client experience needs to look like, and what the fundamental principles are that need to be delivered. The second thing is, okay, well, how have consumer behaviours started to change during COVID? So actually, what's the mindset shift? How are people feeling from a financial vulnerability perspective? And what we started to see in terms of, like I said, different behaviours that are coming out of the COVID crisis, and we think are going to carry on in the future, at least in the short to medium term. So that's just a little bit about what I'm here to talk about.
That's great. It's going to be good, isn't it? I'm excited. Cool. So you started off talking about different brands and excelling and delivering a great customer experience. Can you tell us a bit more about what makes a good customer experience?
Yeah, of course. So what we did is, when we first started to try to understand, I guess, what those pillars were that sit underneath delivering a great, consistent customer experience, is we got consumers to talk to us about stories. So those stories told us about what a great experience looked like and what a poor experience looked like. And what we were able to do is start to understand what the common themes were that came through that. And we've spent 11 years validating that those things are truly the right things that drive somebody's ability to be loyal, and to recommend a brand to their friends, family, colleagues. So there's 6 things, and they go in a particular order, because you need to think about actually how do you make sure you've got the kind of foundational pillars in place before you can go off and do some sort of, if you like, the cherry on top of the cake. So the first one is, how do you demonstrate that you've got integrity? So how do you demonstrate that you are a brand, you've got clear brand values, that you can go off and deliver those values and intentionally deliver those values through each and every one of those interactions that a customer might have with the organisation. So integrity, if you like, is our kind of core foundational pillar. If you don't have integrity, people are not going to be attracted to the brand in the first place, and therefore, you know, you're not going to be able to acquire new customers and retain the customers that you've got. The second one is resolution. So we as consumers, or we as human beings, sorry, expect things to go wrong, but it's how an organisation deals with something when it goes wrong that really truly matters. So actually, when you think about things like John Lewis and their like heroic recovery, actually it's all about making sure that you really truly understand the impact it's had on the customer, and you put them back in a space that is consistent with how they would have been had nothing gone wrong, or actually in a better space as a result of something going wrong and you resolving it for them. You know, really creating brand advocates through those moments where things haven't quite gone right. So resolution is the second one. Expectations. So this is a really interesting one. So how do we genuinely understand the expectations from an outside-in perspective, so from a customer point of view rather than the business point of view? So typically businesses will set you know, how long a particular process or journey or experience is going to take based on how long a process takes internally, or how long they think they can, you know, an internal SLA that they've had in place for a period of time. Well, actually that might be completely disengaged with how the customer expects it to happen. So how do we understand those expectations, meet those expectations and exceed them in those moments where it truly matters to do that is really important. Then we move on to time and effort. So actually, how do we make sure that we are minimizing the time and effort on behalf of the consumer? So time and effort plays into things like, how do we make sure that we've got really seamless digital experiences? How do we make sure that actually if I start in a digital channel, but I want to speak to somebody, that they already know that I started in that digital channel and they're able to, I'm not having to repeat myself multiple times. So time and effort is really important. Then finally, we've got personalization. And then empathy. So personalization, if you think about it now, when we first started looking at this, personalization was very kind of, if you like, in a digital context or even in a physical context, saying, hi, Vicky, you know, and using my name. That was kind of seen as good personalization 10, 11 years ago. Now, when we're talking about personalization, it's how do organizations use the data that they hold about an individual to really genuinely personalize the experience, the proposition, the service that they give to somebody. So, you know, there's got to be a value exchange in terms of the data and the information that we give to somebody. And then finally, you've got empathy. So actually it's not always appropriate to empathize, but being able to identify when it is appropriate to empathize and do that in a genuine way rather than a forced way to create that kind of human connection, again, makes a huge difference. So it's those 6 things, when you bring them together, they're not things that you would go off and, you know, you wouldn't just focus on empathy, you wouldn't just focus on time and effort. It's how do you bring all of those things together, and different things will come into play in different circumstances.
Cool, that's great, thank you. I can see a lot of writing happening and a lot of nodding happening, so I'm hoping some questions are going to come as well. But my next question would be, so we've talked and touched on a little bit about the pandemic, and obviously we know that that's impacted customers. Can you tell us what kind of impact that your research tells us that it's had on their needs and the relationships that they have with organisations?
Of course, yeah. So one of the things that we look at is how are people feeling about, if you like, the financial situation now that kind of COVID's set in. So we found that 43% of people are feeling either financially overwhelmed or financially vulnerable as a result of the COVID crisis. So we're also seeing that actually 8 in 10 people are choosing to make different purchase decisions. So actually, you know, 8 in 10 people are putting off or limiting their spend on things that they would have traditionally spent on. So, you know, we've got nearly half of people that are saying that they're actually financially worse off. We've got, you know, nearly half of people saying they're financially vulnerable compared to where they were in a pre-COVID world. And you've got 80% of people saying I'm actually limiting my spending in the world versus where I was in the pre-COVID situation. Now, as you would expect, where are people starting to limit that spending? Well, obviously, we're not all going out to bars and restaurants and doing all of the things that we were doing historically. So that we're seeing a significant drop in the amount of spend in terms of kind of going out and entertainment side of things. But what we are seeing is about a 20% increase in the amount of people that are putting their money into their savings. So actually saving and being able to protect the things that matter to people is becoming more and more of a priority as we progress through the pandemic. Other things that people are also thinking about are things like, obviously, you know, actually staycations in the UK. So I don't know how many of you in the meeting have actually, you know, tried to book that abroad holiday, then found out that actually it's now on the restrictions list. So again, people are starting to sort of, I guess, get a little bit weary and a bit concerned about that. And are spending a lot more in, obviously, kind of staying local, staying in the UK, but still being able to get away from home in a place that they feel is quite safe. But we are also still seeing actually an increase in spend for future abroad holidays. You know, everyone's very much got that kind of, if you like, sort of sunny horizon in mind, so that, you know, when they do come out the other side of this, they do think, you know, I'm gonna have that extra special holiday that I haven't had before. But, you know, for me, what's really telling with all of this is, you know, that there's that additional financial vulnerability, and people are really focused in now on, you know, it's important that I save, it's important that I protect the things that matter to me.
Cool. And I saw that Paul, Paul, you popped something in the chat. I think we should do questions as we go, maybe. Do you want to ask Vicki?
Yeah, hi Vicki. I was a number of times within businesses, I talk to them about core values, and often they say integrity, and particularly in financial services. For me, it's pretty much a given. You ought to, you know, have integrity, shouldn't you? So do you think that applies across all brands then? I mean, I know that people demonstrate eventually they haven't got any integrity, such as Virgin Media, but you know, you just assume that everybody has that, don't you?
It's a really good question, Paul. And actually, yes, it applies across all sectors, all brands. And actually, we're seeing that's even more important in a kind of COVID situation. So actually, people are really challenging to, if you like, the brands that they're spending their time, their money, and their effort with, to demonstrate that they've got the right values and that they have got integrity. One of the key things that we found is actually organisations have got to demonstrate trust in a way that they've never had to before. So it's much more than just sort of saying, you know, we're a brand that stands for this, and having a really clear marketing and brand message out there. It's genuinely about demonstrating that you are a brand that puts profit before people, that you are an organisation that has got a that's really looking after its employees, but also its customers, that you've also got a societal, you know, approach to this. And what have you been doing throughout the pandemic to help society in general? And I think for especially younger consumers, so probably the sort of 18 to 44 category, we're seeing that the environmental piece is coming out quite strong as well. So they're looking at the brands that they're spending the money with, they're looking at them and really challenging and going, do you know what, actually not having that sort of strong base level of integrity is no longer going to be acceptable. You know, I'm going to take my money and elsewhere if you don't do something about it. So yeah, I think it's definitely cross sector. I think there's some sectors that are ahead more than others, as you just discussed.
I think what's also interesting about that is when you talk about, you know, how am I looking after my people? How am I looking after my customers? What's my lean into society? And this is where I think that brands and customers, that's where their ESG philosophy just totally comes to life. I think typically, certainly in this space, we look at ESG as an outward proposition towards investors. But really, it's, for me, it's, and I know Heather, you posted something about this on social last week. It's about your sense of purpose as a firm, as a business, and how that emanates out into how you look after your people, how you look after your clients, what your investment proposition and your products are. And I think this is really telling now, especially in a I say post-pandemic, but during pandemic world. These questions are coming in, so we're going off script, Vicki, but I know you're cool with that.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Heather, you came in, she messaged me privately saying, I've got a question. So here we go, shoot, go for your question, Heather.
So it's really interesting, and I wanted to pick up on what you were talking about, personalization and the data value exchange. And I'm wondering if you've noticed anything specifically as a result of COVID, where people's attitudes to data sharing have changed. Because there was, I mean, a couple of years ago, there was something where the NHS wanted to capture people's health data and centralize it to use machine learning to better understand outbreaks of disease and all sorts of things. And there was this massive uproar that people opted out of this because of the fear of Big Brother. And then fast forward a few years and you have people downloading the NHS track and trace app. They're happy to put their symptoms into that. But there's a clear value exchange there where I'm getting something. And I just wonder if, you know, now that we're living all of our lives through this little box and all of our data is being stored and shared and used, whether people have become more relaxed about data sharing and having a personalized experience as a result of that.
I don't think they've become more relaxed. I think they've become more relaxed in certain instances. I think actually what's happened is people have woken up to the fact that there does need to be a value exchange. So no longer are they willing to just share their data without getting something back. So actually they're becoming a lot more savvy, if you like, around the types of organisations or that they want to have that kind of value exchange in terms of data with. So, you know, actually, again, it's about proof points. So you might share a bit of information with an organisation, then you see that they're using that really proactively in order to engage with you and to demonstrate that they understand you and they understand your needs. At that point, they might try and take a bit more information so that they can continue to tailor the experience and personalise it. So what we're seeing is actually some of the organisations that are doing this particularly well are those organisations that are demonstrating that value exchange very early on and just asking people to share a certain amount of information so they can build the sort of trust aspect and demonstrate the value exchange before they get into asking for, you know, reams and reams of information that actually, again, the consumer or the customer might not feel any value from. So I think it's an evolution. I think people have become more savvy, you know, with the whole GDPR thing. But, you know, every time you go on a website, having to choose what you, in terms of kind of cookies tracking, you know, everybody's more aware of this stuff than they have ever been before. And I think especially, again, just coming back to maybe some of the younger consumers, they are very clear that if they are going to share their information, that there has to be some sort of payback. So it's very much around really thinking about, I guess, the you know, the consumers of the future, the people that are going to be saving, spending, investing, and I guess what they need in order to be able to provide that information, because they're used to doing it in terms of social media. They live their lives online, but actually, in order to live their lives and for you to be able to use that information, they need to get something back, and that's, you know, they're clearly demonstrating that.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up question? Because I was going to say exactly that. I'm not sure your example actually of the opt-out for cookies. I was like, but I mean, I've seen stats on dwell time on those pages, and it's infinitesimal because we're just overexposed to these disclosures that we just click off of them, and I think that passive opt-in is so high, and social media is a great example where I think, you know, I don't think people are necessarily aware of the degree to which they might say in a survey. And that's always, as a market researcher, I'm always trying to challenge people to think about, you know, what people will say in a survey versus what they actually do is often markedly different, not because they're trying to mislead nice people like me who do surveys or people like you. But so I just challenge that a little bit, and I wonder if people are really making that calculation about sharing data.
I think some are, and like I say, I think this is an evolution. I think it's about so again, coming back to the kind of cookie example, you're right. I don't know about you, but every time one pops up, I just opt out of everything and then go on my merry little way. I probably have opted out of a load of stuff that would personalize and be really useful for me if I read it all properly, but you're overwhelmed, and therefore my kind of default mode is opt out. But when you're thinking about, so if I think back to a couple of years ago, everybody was going crazy about like the Internet of Things, and you know, the fact that when you've got your Alexa in your house, Alexa's always listening. So Alexa hears things, is able to pick up on that information, is that they're able to tailor the experience and talk to you about the things that really matter. People either love that or they hate that. They either love the fact that Alexa knows absolutely everything about them because they get so much value and value from having her in their lives. Or you could be somebody that absolutely doesn't want somebody listening all the time. So I do genuinely believe that people are becoming more aware of the implications of sharing their information and their data across all sorts of different channels. But I do think I would say that it's probably some of the younger categories where we're seeing different types of behaviour. So like I say, these, you know, younger consumers are more genuinely do expect more of a value exchange if they're going to share that information, and they are starting, even their social media behaviors are starting to change. So you've got the sort of millennials, and then you've got the next generation coming through, and they're not using social media in the same way. They're not as open about everything that they were, you know, the millennials were. So I think we are starting to see a shift, but I don't disagree with you. I think there's a lot of people passively going around sharing their information without any real understanding of the implications, but it's an evolution, I think.
Cool, thank you. Good debate, and obviously relevant to everyone, right? That cookie thing pops up. I'm in the default saying no all the time at the minute, or I get in a journey and then I'm like, oh, I can't do anything else, so I just drop out the journey. But anyway, this isn't about me. Amira, you've got a question.
Yeah, first I've got to say, Vicki, thank you so much for putting me in the young category and extending that out to their 44s. That has made my day.
My pleasure.
My question kind of linked to your saving habits and the vulnerability thing. So I didn't know how granular your data goes, and are you seeing that going into cash, which is obviously giving incredibly poor return, or is there an appetite for risk in that, for kind of, they recognize this as a short-term issue and a problem and environment that we're in, so they're investing and putting it into the markets?
I can't answer that, Amira, but I will, just because we haven't gone to that level of detail.
Yeah.
What I will do is, those are great questions. So let me take that one away, because I think that's certainly something that we can look at as we progress.
That'd be amazing. Thank you.
I'm sure we could dig a bit deeper and see where people are focusing.
Cool. Thank you. Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. So Vicki, yeah, this is CX is a big topic that I'm very passionate about as well. I've spoken on it a number of times. In fact, last time I did was at the Trump Doral in Miami.
Oh.
And I have those slides. If you want them, you can have them. It was good presentation overall. So I wondered though what tools you're using, or do you believe in using tools such as design thinking, or even journey mapping, customer journey mapping, where you literally map out what happens to them from A to Z, and then find pain points and pleasure points that you can then leverage.
Yeah. Well, Brian, it's like I planted that question. So yeah, I know this is my life. This is what I do. So so I guess just coming back to, what would I advocate organizations think about, and the tools that you need to think about? Genuinely, customer journey mapping, not just mapping it for the sake of understanding it, but doing something with it to drive your priorities and think about where you're going to focus your effort, for me is transformational. The other nice thing about journey mapping is it typically ties together lots of different parts of the organization, so everyone can understand the role that they play in getting the consumer or the customer the outcome that they're effectively trying to achieve. So for me, journey mapping and having a consistent approach to journey mapping across an organization is absolutely key. And I think you do that from two different layers. You do that from the outside in perspective, where you're genuinely understanding three different things. So the physical experience that somebody goes through, so the different channels, the emotional experience, so what the highs and the lows, like you say, and then the rational experience, so what the questions that they're sort of rationally asking as they're going through this, that you need to be able to answer as a brand, as an organization, as somebody that's interacting with them, to help them move to the next stage in the journey successfully. So for me, journey mapping is, it's transformational. It's fundamental to being able to understand where you need to focus your effort. I think in order to do journey mapping really well, and again, to come back to the prioritization piece, you also then need to have really good measurement in place, so research and insight and information, both again from an outside in and inside out perspective. So really understanding the moments of truth, as you said, the pleasure points, the pain points, measuring how you're delivering those and the impact it's having, both from an external and an operational and commercial perspective. If you bring those things together, it's really, really powerful. But otherwise, I think it can be, sometimes the customer stuff can be seen as fluffy, because it comes across as really pretty journey maps on a page. But if you don't underpin that with data and insight, and something that you can use to challenge to challenge stakeholders, challenge the organization, to say genuinely these are the things we need to prioritize, then I think it can come on, its value might not be realized effectively. So massive advocate in those things, but I think you've got to do it the right way.
One of the things I found too, to add to that, Vicki, agree with all those points on metrics, is you visually see the poor client or customer bouncing around like a pinball machine.
Yeah.
Because what you do, you have these little silos, everybody, where you show the functions and how they're crossing over from front office to mid to back, either by phone, whatever the touch point is. Could be face-to-face, personal, virtual, or whatever.
Yeah.
And when you see that visually, it's very powerful, because you can go to your support team and say, look at what we're doing to this poor client. They're literally bouncing up and down, our organization before they finally get either the answer or service offering that they're looking for. So I love journey mapping. I think it's,
Oh, we could talk about it. We could talk about it all day.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. I'm coming to Emma. Emma, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. It was really more about kind of how things have changed. And I just think of my mum in this situation with COVID. She has probably taken herself at 70, God knows what, 4 or something, out of being a vulnerable person, because she was the typical classic person that would always go to the supermarket because she couldn't possibly do online shopping. She would always go to the bank. She'd go to the post office to pay a letter, to post a letter and all that sort of stuff. And in this environment, she's always been really scared of technology because she's scared of what the impact of technology. They might steal all her money, or they might, something might happen. But in this COVID world, she's taken herself out of being vulnerable because she's just said, well, there's no one going to pick up the pieces for me. I can't get anyone else to do it. I've got to get on with it. So, she's buying everything on Amazon. She does online shopping. She'll print off something from the post of Royal Mail and post a letter, and just she's taken herself out of that. And I think that's one of those, if you're looking about the move to technology, unless COVID had happened, not that I'm saying it's a good thing, but we probably wouldn't have made that massive jump for those sorts of people if they hadn't have had to. So that was that point. And the other point I wanted to make was I wondered if you were seeing any sort of shift in financial goals of people either saving for a house or saving for a pension. I mean, there's quite a few people that I've spoken to and that I know that, their biggest goal was always been, I need to get rid of my mortgage as quickly as possible, and then I need to carry on saving for my pension. And all that's changed. And I know at least 5 people that have said, I don't care if I've got a mortgage until I'm 65. I just want to make sure that my savings are up, and that should I lose what appears like it's a safe job tomorrow, because you just don't know, that I want that financial stability to fall back on. And that really interests me, because I just think that in the world that we live in, that has an impact on lots of things. So innovation and all those sorts of things. And then, so I just wondered if you kind of had any stats on that, or you track it, or you follow it, or...
So anecdotally, so in terms of have we got any stats, again, we haven't got any data at that level, but anecdotally from speaking to consumers, so obviously a lot of what I do is go out and we're talking to consumers and listening to them all the time, that need to have ready access to money versus it being all back in the mortgage is definitely something that we are seeing. So again, that kind of reassurance and personal safety aspect in terms of protecting and looking after themselves, the things that matter, and also being okay should anything go wrong, is definitely something that we are seeing, and is coming out really strongly in the data. And I think I just want to go back to your point about your mum and the digital adoption. I think you're absolutely spot on in terms of without COVID, it wouldn't have accelerated the digital adoption, especially for certain segments of society. But it's been really interesting. The younger categories are all sort of demanding that organisations interact with them digitally through the channels that they're used to interacting with their friends, their colleagues and their family through. So they're all asking for things that are more sort of social media based. They want messenger apps, they want web chat, they want video calls. That tends to be something that we're seeing at sort of the younger side. What we are seeing is a more of an increase in more of your sort of traditional digital channels, like you say, with some of the older age categories. But what we're finding that is an increase in digital to start with support obviously from friends and family. So there's this kind of, again, this role in terms of being able to support people to adopt these new behaviours. And what we've seen is it's about 50-50 in terms of people that are having good new digital experiences. So if you have a good new digital experience, 50% of those people are saying that they would continue to act through that channel in a post-COVID world. If you have a bad digital experience or a bad experience in your new channel, 75% of those people say that they want to go back to speaking to somebody in the contact centre or going into branch and having a face-to-face conversation. So again, it's an opportunity for organisations, like you say, to accelerate that digital adoption, but you've got to do that in the right way. Otherwise, if you force people into digital channels and they're not getting the right kind of experience and outcome, it can actually have a detrimental impact on your ability to get them to adopt those channels in the long run.
Thank you.
Cool, thanks. And just keeping on the theme, I'm jumping about a bit. I'm coming to you, Helena, because you're next up, and you and Sam, I can see in the chat, have been having a conversation about like banking and online banking. So maybe come back to that. But I really wanted to, I saw what you put in the chat about adopting digital and what that's meaning in a financial advisor world, about like the meetings, 100% remote video calls. So how's that like impacting your business, and what kind of feedback are you getting from kind of like the advisor community on that?
Interesting. I spoke to someone today who has decided to change his business entirely to remote only, because before he was seeing clients face to face, and now he's just doing video calls going forward. And I think if you asked us a year ago, how much of our client meetings was video conferencing, I think it was very poorly taken up in businesses. I think I saw a Boring Money report that said 2% of clients was okay with video conferencing. They preferred a phone call over it. And I think if you look at it now and ask people that same question again, I think the answer would be a lot different, because even older clients have been amazing in how they've adapted to either WhatsApp calls or Zoom or Teams. They're all much keener than I expected them to be to do video conferencing. So we haven't seen any issues with clients having meetings over video at all. So it's actually been, it wasn't what I expected.
See, that's really interesting. And I spoke to one of the protection data providers, and they said that the last quarter, don't quote me on this, oh gosh, but this is going out now, isn't it? Well, I'll keep it anonymized, but I got some insight that from a provider that they've seen an increase in the number of females buying protection in the last quarter. And we've been hypothesizing about why that might be the case. And we think, Helena, it's exactly as you say. People are doing Skype calls, Zoom calls at home amongst their family, thinking about protection during the pandemic. Both partners are there at the meetings as opposed to one, and then just figuring out the advice. But when you can see both partners, and we think that the advice is going to both male and female, or the priority earner as well as the more passive earner, and therefore there's a take up in protection. I just think that's really interesting. If indeed that is the case, we need to dig into that data a little bit more. That, you know, this pandemic and Zoom calls and Skype calls with both people there could actually mean that families get more holistic financial planning, which I think is definitely interesting. But enough about me. You had a question, and where there was a discussion around banking that you wanted to ask or comment on.
I'd love to hear what Sam's got to say on this, actually, because I think there's a huge amount of people that would benefit from budgeting better, especially with what Vicki said about 80% of people watching what they're spending. And I think open banking is such an obvious answer for that.
And are we seeing on that, I guess, before I go to Sam, are you seeing anything on the banking side about how customers are engaging, Vicki, using digital?
Yeah, so again, I mean, it's following similar sorts of trends. People can no longer go into their branches and have, or it's not as easy to go into their branches. Appointments are now something that they have to make. So again, we're seeing a similar sort of digital adoption from a banking perspective, but historically we're all quite used to dealing with, or a lot of people, the vast majority of people are used to dealing with their banks in some form of digital way. So but it's now, you know, actually when you look at some of the main retail banks, and like that, again, just thinking about the digital adoption, they're rolling out new functions and capabilities on through their digital channels at the rate of knots, because they know that this is their opportunity to again drive more digital adoption, and to make sure that people can do things in a simple, slick, straightforward, easy digital way.
Cool, thanks. Sam, over to you, Miss Open Banking. Do you want to comment on that?
What's the question? Sorry, because there's been a lot. Yeah,
you're right.
What's the question? People want me to answer? Sorry.
Well, there's a lot of questions and chat happening in the chat, which I can barely keep up with, but I'm doing my best. But there's during COVID, the move to more digital banking, online banking. Do you want to just kind of like share with the whole group some of the stuff that's coming out in the chat and what you're seeing in that banking space?
Yeah, so I think the up until this year, so probably January, only people that really wanted to manage their money were managing their money. And then post this year, with the advent, I think, of open banking and a lot more chatter about it, you know, in the market, going back to that integrity point, I think people felt safer being able to, you know, use all these apps that are out where they're leveraging open banking. So there became a bit more of a groundswell, I think, is what I found. The only thing I would share with the group, which I found interesting, is that so the promotion of open banking brought people to the door, but consumers are not, I would argue that consumers are not that aware. So, and the reason I say this is because they don't know when they're screen scraping or open banking. So they will because we can only get Hargreaves by screen scraping. There is no open banking account to Hargreaves. And even though the journey is different to link your Hargreaves account, to link your Lloyd's account, they're quite different. And we label them direct and indirect, so it's really clear how we're connecting these accounts. People have no idea. They just think they're connecting their accounts. And we try and make it really clear. So don't get me wrong, some of the consumers will definitely know, but the reason I think they don't know, they don't care. So once they've kind of got their head around something, so back to your point, Vicki, about the value exchange, then I think they don't really care kind of how that happens or what happens. And I think that's proven by Facebook, right? Once people are bought into the value exchange, I don't think they really care then. They're like over it. Or Tinder or any of those, you know, if you think about the horror stories that come out all the time. But actually, I think people are a bit like, yeah, but if the value exchange is there and they quite like it, they can definitely shake off any concerns they might have had. But I think the one that was interesting, which is coming up, is the savings, because I think that's amazing. And cash is definitely king, unfortunately, for the investment world at the moment. I'm going to find out for you, I'll find out the split between investment, but at the moment, what we tracked was into cash savings. So I haven't got the data to hand about the investment bit, but I'm pretty sure from what we saw, and you know, people were using cash accounts. I mean, I don't think it was pouring in at that rate, because I think otherwise, or you'd be telling me about it, wouldn't you? You'd have seen your assets under management double, wouldn't you? Last year in COVID, which I think you're probably not telling me that's happened. I don't know. Who's in the investment world here who can say, Amira, you know, have you seen assets under management double? You know, like, what's your view? Because I mean, I can tell you the cash
No,
side.
not new monies. So regular contributions have stayed exactly as they are. We didn't really lose a lot of direct debits, or they reinstated really quickly if they were cancelled, and transfers galore. But new money is not quite where it was, certainly for January to March.
Yeah, so looking at our data, that doesn't surprise me, right? Because I think people have put it into their cash accounts, but they have definitely put money away into, as you said, probably costing them money where it's going there. But I guess given how volatile the stock markets have been, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think we've, oh, sorry, go on, Helena.
I would be interested to know if that's people starting to save because they've never saved before and they now realise they need to look out for the future because it's uncertain, or whether that's already people that are actively saving but just saving more. I don't know if that's something that's available.
Yeah, I could probably find that out actually.
This is great. We've got both Sam and Vicki doing some additional research. I can see Alan.
I didn't come on here to get homework. What am I doing?
Sorry. Look, we're a community. We're going to share. I'm going to go to Gillian for the next question, and then I'm going to go to Alan afterwards. Okay.
Hi there. Hi, Vicki. Really fascinating. I really enjoyed listening to the 6 different factors that impact customer experience. But my question may be slightly different. So based on that and some of the research that you're doing, are you seeing any brands that are performing extremely well during the pandemic? And equally, are there some that are performing less well? And are there any surprises out there?
Oh, good question. Okay, so there are good examples of organisations that have demonstrated their integrity particularly well throughout the pandemic. So you've got organisations that are really clearly demonstrating that they are doing things for the community and for the people. Now, coming back to the fact that trust is moved from being kind of quite one-dimensional, if you like, in terms of, you know, having clear set of brand values and sort of going off and just delivering what you say you will, to all of these other multifaceted requirements in terms of, you know, societal purpose, environmental purpose. I'd say that the brands that are doing best are those organisations that have clearly gone after making sure that, you know, society, key workers are all being considered, well looked after. So, and I'll give you some examples of brands that you wouldn't historically think are, you know, this wouldn't commercially necessarily mean that they're doing any better, but British Gas is a good example of an organisation that, you know, obviously it wasn't going out there fixing everybody's boilers, doing what it does day in, day out. So it took a lot of its people and their vans and effectively supported community projects, making sure that people could get access to vulnerable people could get access to goods and services that they needed. So I think from an integrity perspective, there are a set of brands that have done quite well out of, you know, like some of the things that they've done, and they've really started to resonate and connect with people in a way that they hadn't done historically. So that will mean in the long term that people are more likely to consider them and recommend them. There's clearly, you know, good old Jeff and Amazon have done all right commercially throughout this, because obviously in order for us to get access to things, you know, we're all probably Amazoning more than we have done historically. I'd say some of the brands that have struggled are the ones that actually haven't necessarily gone out there with kind of, they haven't changed their messaging, they haven't changed anything. So, you know, they've almost remained silent, if you like, almost like nothing's really going on. So again, coming back to that point around how do I demonstrate that we are, you know, clearly in tune with what's going on with our customers, our society and stuff. There are many brands that have just sort of carried on with a business as usual perspective. And what we are seeing is there's two different spectrums, if you like, in terms of the organisations or the clients that we work with. So you've got the clients that are almost seeing COVID as a, you know, they believe that the customer is never going to be the same in the future. So, you know, everything that was there before, they're now sort of rethinking and making sure that it's fit for purpose and that they're agile and they're able to move, you know, regardless of what happens. And then you've got the brands that kind of think that in a post-COVID world, everything's going to go back to normal. And I'd say it's the type A, which are the, you know, we're prepared for things are going to be really different, that are going to come out of this. They might not necessarily see the results right now, but they will come out of this a lot stronger than those type B that are typically thinking that the strategy that they had and everyone's going to go back to our behaviours in a pre-COVID world are the ones that are going to struggle in the long run.
Thanks.
Cool. I was going to go to Alan, but he's declined to share. So I'm not trying to grass you up here, but that's fine. I think it's because it was a question related to cash, and I know that I'm not going to put Vicki on the spot and ask a cash question, but I think there's a lot of chat happening there's a lot of chat in the chat about cash, which is obviously, maybe we can have another session specifically around cash versus cash. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure you can come back to me with something really exciting in a moment, Alan. No pressure in 10 minutes left, but I'm just going to put it out. He's like, gosh, why did I show up on this call? So we've got to I'm trying to navigate through. Has anyone got a question that they want to signal to me? Because there's lots of different comments, but I'm not sure if they've got any questions, because if so, I will. Brian.
Good question. Is anybody encountering confusion or questions with their clients around the whole crypto topic as it relates to their wealth planning?
Wow, big question.
Because, you know, the young people I'm coming across here, by the way, Robinhood is big. You were asking where all the money from COVID relief went. In the US, all the young people put it in the market, writing call options on all these, you know, Amazon, that type of thing. And a lot of them lost the money they were given by the government. But crypto is their main focus for building wealth. If you talk to any young person in North America, I don't know what the UK is like. It's crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum. There's rumors about a Fed coin coming out early part of next year. I don't know if it's a thing over there.
I have no view on that at all. Anyone else in the UK? Sam, hi, Sam waving at me.
it is the most requested enhancement to Money Hub from the younger people to include cryptocurrency. And I will put my hand up and say that my husband mines crypto. So I am the proud owner, if he dies, of Grin, Beam,
Wow.
coins, Bitcoin. I mean, I'm telling you, and another one I can't remember off the top of my head. I try really hard to remember them because I'm like, they're just like Grin, Grin, Beam, BAM. I mean, honestly, it is another world. But you're right, Brian, the youngsters, I mean, I'm telling you, they are obsessed by it.
Yeah. I don't know why, but it comes up all the time over here, and people come to stop me and ask, what do you think of Bitcoin? What do you think of stable coins? And I speak on it at conferences. I did a whole series at Fund Forum, and I know a little bit about it, but there are so many scams and so many ways of losing all the money. We had one in Canada called Gerald Cotton, the guy who vanished in India at an orphanage and took 150 million of wealth with him, and he's vanished.
And OneCoin, is another one. So whenever I speak at conferences, I get asked about it all the time, and I hope I do my bit to help, because I think I get some credibility by the fact that I actually own all these coins, and my husband mines them directly, with a server farm and all the rest. And then I tell them, or not to invest in them unless you are equally able to make money from that as you can by going and betting on a racehorse. So if you feel that comfortable going and betting on a racehorse, by all means, you bet on crypto. But I said that, that's why I tell them that is what you're doing. You're just betting.
That's what it is. Yep.
Yeah. So that's what my view is, and hopefully I help, because it upsets me that people call it investing, because I don't believe it is at the moment.
Well said.
From an advisor point of view, we've got to be careful because it's only regulated for money laundering purposes. So I personally, if a client asks me to make a recommendation as to whether they should invest in crypto, I'll take the same view that what Sam just said. Speculative, are you prepared to lose all your money? That's the way you should approach it. So I do get asked questions, but I don't think many advisors would touch it as something that you would recommend, to be honest.
Okay, so I'm gonna see, I love the way these conversations start and go all the way around. We're talking about all sorts of bits and pieces. I bloody love it. Right, we have got 7 minutes to go, so I'm going to go with one final question to Vicki around, are you seeing any differences around customers who buy direct or intermediated? Do you have a cut through of that data, or is there anything stand out that you could share with us around that intermediated or direct customer?
So we don't have that data, but again, just talking to customers through a variety of different mediums, what we are seeing, I guess, is, let's think, what's the best way to put this? So a lot of the direct customers are just looking for things that are simple to understand and really reassuring. So, the language and the way that things are being articulated, again, coming back to time and effort also translates into having really simple, language and making sure that the way that you're talking to people through any kind of communication, whether it's verbal or written, is easy for them to understand. And actually, when people are coming direct, one of the biggest reasons that they end up having to contact or even seek advice or support later is because things just aren't simple and they don't really understand, what's going on, what's being said to them. So I think from an intermediated perspective, again, people are really becoming more and more concerned. Are they doing the right thing? Are they genuinely doing the right thing? So as their financial as financial vulnerability becomes something that's affecting more people are more cognizant of the fact that they need to save, and they need to plan and need to think about things that they haven't necessarily always put as much time and effort and thought into. There is a definite, if you like, again, coming back to kind of almost like knowledge gap, so people are looking for that reassurance. So I do think that we will see that there's probably people that haven't historically gone through intermediaries that will start to do that, because they want to know that what they are doing is genuinely the right thing for them for now and in the future. So it's more of a mindset shift that we're starting to see, and there's this kind of need for reassurance. People are still going direct, but they want the comms to be really simple and straightforward, and people that historically might have gone direct are starting to consider, some of them are starting to consider kind of the more intermediated route, because they just want that reassurance of knowing that they're doing the right thing.
Cool. And I guess my very final question, I said that was my last one, but I've got, is there any diversity slices that you've got on your data, whether it's gender? You talked a bit about young people, is there anything that comes screaming out the data that is interesting from a diversity perspective?
So the key cut of the data is all around sort of, if you like, age being at the moment. So the guys are looking at it and considering. Now we've actually got a new set of global research that hopefully will be launched in the next week. So one of the key things that we're looking at doing is trying to split that out and understand, like you say, some, even whether it's gender, age, etc. Now, I think the age group analysis was interesting in that, again, the people that are more demanding of organisations and brands, again, coming from a coming back to, they're demanding value for money. Value for money is much more around, am I paying for things that I don't need to use? And am I actually getting value from the things I've got, and are they protecting and saving for the right in the right places? So I think younger people are becoming more and more demanding, and historically that wasn't the case. They are expecting the brands and the organisations, as we talked about earlier, to be, really clear on their values and how they're going off and they're doing things. So I think at the moment what we found is that, like I say, there's more digital adoption of some of the older categories than I think anybody anticipated, but it's being supported by friends and family. And younger people, I think, have got more of a voice. They are more vocal, they expect more from their brands, and I think that's it's going to force a lot of organisations to think genuinely about like who they are, what they stand for, and how they're going to go off and deliver against those needs in the future.
Brilliant. Okay, I think that's a wrap. That's been really, really great. I love the conversation around customer. I think that we spend a lot of time as an industry talking about propositions, talking about our businesses, what we're trying to do, and we forget that there's someone at the end who allocates and gives up pounds and pence out of their net salary to buy the products that we are involved in our value chain. So it was really important to me that we spend some time focusing on those people, those customers, the buyers, the people that keep us in business, and just really understand over the last 6 to 9 months some of the challenges that they've been going through and how we can understand those, incorporate that into our businesses, and remain relevant both today and in the future. And I guess that all gets gobbled up into our ESG lens as well. So thank you, Vicki. Thank you for bringing your research. Thank you for sharing your insights, and thank you for just being ready to catch all of those questions that came flying in at you. That was awesome.
I enjoyed it.
Cool, thank you. So I'm going to hand back to Heather for our wrap up and signal of what we're doing next week. Is that right?
I wonder if we should pass it to Gillian, actually. Gillian,
Sorry.
do you want to? I think you're hosting next week. Yeah, we're perfectly organised around here.
We are. I'm just madly trying to get off mute here. Yes, it's over to me next week. Sam has kindly swapped her session with mine for next week, just because I'm delighted to be talking about behavioural finance next week. So I'm going to be joined by one of my fellow colleagues, a guy called Stuart Podmore. Some of you might have seen him speak at events and conferences, but his specialist subject at Schroders is behavioural finance. And I'm always challenging him on this, because whilst there's loads of research, I think we always have to apply the so what test. So that's all very interesting, but what we're going to do with it, and does it make a difference to our lives, and how does it make us behave and think differently? So he's going to talk about it, cover some of the research, talk about some of the biases, and I'll maybe try and give him a bit of a hard time, and I'm hoping you'll join me. So that's next week.
Right, sounds great. Thank you, Vicki. Thanks, Rose and Gillian. Look forward to next week. Fantastic.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, everybody.